Welcome to Sam's Business Growth Show. I'm Sam Dunning, a digital marketing, sales and business growth evangelist. Tune in and subscribe today as I'll be interviewing business leaders, experts and entrepreneurs from around the globe. You'll be learning their story, how digital marketing has helped them along the way, and exclusive tips and insights to help you skyrocket your own business. And welcome back to the show. I'm excited to be joined by Tiffani Bova today. Tiffani is the Global Growth Evangelist at Salesforce, a best-selling author of Growth IQ, host of the top 50 ranked What's Next podcast, interviewing well-known guests such as Seth Godin, Dan Pink, and Arianna Huffington. She was voted one of the most influential women in California from the National Diversity Council, a top 50 sales and marketing influencer by Top Sales World magazine, named a 2019 Thinkers 50, a top 50 global ranking of management thinkers, and a regular contributor for HBR, Forbes, many other industry leading periodicals, and she's appeared on broadcasts such as MSNBC, BNN, Yahoo Finance, and Cheddar. Tiffani, a warm welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me. What a great intro. I appreciate it.
That's a very long list of accolades, Tiffani. I'm really excited to go through them.
I'm always like, pick one or something. Sometimes it's strange to hear. Anyway, thank you.
Awesome stuff. So we're all excited to learn your story today, Tiffani. We'd love to learn a bit more about yourself. So kind of where you grew up, how you got into the business world, some of the key roles that you've had along the years and the lessons learned. And then perhaps we can get into some of your top recommended digital marketing strategies and business growth strategies that have helped you progress along the years. So if you could kick it off and give us a bit more background on yourself, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Randomly, I guess, and very fortunately, I was born and raised in Hawaii. I didn't leave until I was almost 30. So my whole life, I spent all my time, at the beach, I guess. That's the greatest way to say it. But it was a fantastic childhood, and it really exposed me to all kinds of things. Culturally, from a food perspective, like we had multiple New Years because we do Chinese New Year's and American New Year's, and people from all over the world would come and visit, and it was just a beautiful place. So
sounds awesome.
I feel blessed every day. Now I reflect back on when people used to say, "Did you used to get island fever?" When you lived in Hawaii, and I'm like, I only wish that I could get out of the mainland fever and get back to Hawaii, but I can't seem to fly back. Unfortunately, I've been trying to get back to see my mom during this time, but they're not letting anybody in, really. So I moved to the mainland U.S. when I was close to 30. But I had been doing kind of sales and marketing for a couple of businesses through my 20s. And, it was just really just to make a little bit of money and, go to the beach. It wasn't anything serious. But when I was in high school, I spent a lot of time with my best friend's family that owned indoor arcades and outdoor carnivals. And so they had me run all the outdoor games at 16, 17, 18 years old. And so I was a crash course in business.
Awesome.
And I knew I really, really enjoyed it. And so when it was time to go to college, I was like, I'll get an undergrad in business, and that's what I'm going to do, right? I want to be just like my friend's mom. She was sort of a big inspiration and mentor for me when I was growing up. And while at college, they said, business isn't really for you. You need to find another career. And so, which I'm not really sure how to take that, but it was probably the best thing that could happen to me because I didn't go down that business path and then go on and get my MBA. I just said, look, I'm going to learn from doing, and got a degree in something that I knew I probably was not going to pursue, but it didn't matter. Got out of college, and then I just really kind of went heads down and found my way to technology. And then over 15 years, I sold and ran marketing and sales and customer service for startups, for mid-size tech companies. And then my last sort of real sales leadership job was at a Fortune 500 company by the name of Gateway Computers. And then I spent a decade at Gartner as a research fellow, which is the largest analyst and consulting firm for tech in the world. If you're familiar with the Magic Quadrant or the Hype Cycle, that all came from Gartner. And I had to really learn how to be an advisor, consultant, analyst. And now I've been here at Salesforce for the past 4 years. So a very different path to get me here. But now, in reflective, when I look back, I can really tell that each job I had prepared me for what I'm doing now.
Great stuff. Okay, so it's technology side of things is your strong point, Tiffani. So you've been at quite a few organizations, and now, of course, you're at Salesforce. So of the different companies that you've been at, are there any specific lessons that you could perhaps share with our audience, which tends to be mainly sales professionals, marketing professionals, and business owners and entrepreneurs, in terms of business, in terms of either managing teams or marketing strategies that you learned along the way, or times that you've overcome hardship to help boost sales or revenue? Are there any any stories that you could perhaps share with us throughout any of your experiences?
Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind. I'm going to try to go by career, if you will, or where I was working. But it was 2000, sort of the late 1990s into 2000, 2002-ish. I was very early in what was called the World Wide Web. It wasn't called cloud and the internet and all that back then. And I was a Loqua's beta client, which was, has gone on and been acquired by Oracle. But I was one of their first 5 clients in 2000 of how do we actually socially sell and chat online and sell something that's not tangible, right? It was in the cloud, and people didn't want domain names, small businesses. They wanted to put, their company information in the yellow pages and phone books, and they didn't know what the internet was, and they didn't see the value. And so I was really early in that transition.
Okay.
And so I'd say that not much has changed since then, like getting salespeople to really embrace the fact that there are these different models to sell, especially, now that we're in the middle of a pandemic and you can't physically go and see people. It really shows the power of how well you have to do marketing, selling, and servicing from a remote location. And it could be your customer to your office, or now it's your customer to your office, which is now remote in someone's home. And so the power of technology to actually bring those things together is really important. And I think also during this time, we've seen where brands have not invested in technology, and they're having a much harder time in overcoming the remote worker, the remote support, as well as remote selling. So that's sort of one big lesson of the sort of the value of technology early on. The second lesson I'd say was, and for those of you listening or watching, there's always going to be a time in your career where you have to kind of pitch up and say, I think we should spend money on this particular investment. I think this is where the future is going to go. What is it that we should be doing, in order to capitalize on this opportunity? And we have a habit as humans to get very excited about the opportunity that we have in front of us. And while pitching it to others that may be very P&L oriented or very ROI oriented, right? Like, how much is it going to cost us? How quickly are we going to be able to get this paid back? And what are the things we need to do? And the emotional argument you have in those situations doesn't work, because they're coming from a very practical, logical, numbers-based decision, and you're coming from a very emotional decision. It's kind of like, Mars and Venus, right? Two totally different things.
Sure.
And so a consultant at the time, this was a Fortune 500 company. I was tasked with standing up a division of the business that was going to generate 300 million in turnover US.
Wow.
And so it was a big number. And this consultant sat me down and said, look, let me just give you a piece of advice. And now I'm sharing it with you guys. But it was, you have to fight this fight from a numbers perspective. And you have to remove the emotion from it, meaning you have to get the executive team to agree on the hypothesis. How many salespeople, how much marketing money, how many people in the field, how much headcount can you have? And you kind of build this model, and all of those variables are agreed on as the hypothesis. And then I pitched it to the executive team. Now, lo and behold, my emotional argument was off the table, and they all said yes, because I came to them in the language and the way that they wanted me to come to them on, versus coming with, I know this is the thing we should be doing, right? And so now it became pulling the levers. So with every additional head count, I knew I'd get, I did X, I'd get Y. If I spent $1, I knew I'd get back, $1.10 over time, or whatever it might be. And so that model and that hypothesis allowed me to remove the emotion altogether. Now, they decided they wanted to take heads away from me halfway through this sort of endeavor and not lower the number, right? So hit your 300 million, I don't remember the head count, but let's call it 50 head count, million and spend in marketing dollars. Here's what you're going to be using, kind of all the things you're going to do. But now we're going to take half of it from you, and you still need to deliver the 300 million. And I'm like, so did the hypothesis change? And they were like, well, no. And I'm like, okay, well, then you have to change the numbers. And then no, right? And I knew at that moment that I was going to set myself up for failure, right? So at the first day of the next quarter, I walked into the executive team and I said, we are not going to hit our numbers. As a matter of fact, we're going to hit 40% of our numbers. I'm telling you now, we were publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And so they'd look at me and go like, oh, how do you know that? I go, because the model shows that it wasn't going to happen, right? And I wasn't winning at all. And it was time for me to get off that merry-go-round, right? But as a piece of advice, as you are starting out your career or you're moving up or you're having more and more responsibility, I tell you that we get very emotionally excited about what we know in our gut to be true or the data. We have to come to our executives with the language that they want, and then they will make the investment decisions appropriately. Then the third one, which is a quick one, is start with your customers, start with your employees, and start with your customers when making any decisions. Those would be the big three, right? Using technology to help you sell, market, service at scale, consistent customer experiences. The second is building models that allow you to communicate far and wide, up, down, and sideways within your organization, what you think you should be doing. And the third one is, your customers are only going to be as happy as your employees. So you have to invest in your employees so that they can serve your customers. If those two things are happening, revenue and your shareholders will be happy as well.
Got it. No, those are some great lessons, Tiffany. It also sounds like knowing when to move on as well, because as you mentioned at the end, resources got cut quite significantly, and you explained to director level or management that it wasn't going to be realistic to hit the targets they'd set because they pulled those resources away. So I guess it's knowing when to have those conversations.
Yeah, and I would say that, I was sort of moving up, like in my 30s, I changed jobs almost every 18 months. And a lot of it had to do with, I was trying to learn more, do different things, challenge myself, move up, make more money, all the things that you want to do from a career perspective. That was my last stop on being an executive in that kind of role where I had P&L responsibility, people were reporting to me. That was 2006. And I got off the merry-go-round and never went back. So did the analyst route for a decade. Now even at Salesforce, I'm an individual contributor. I don't carry a sales quota. No one reports to me. I'm very externally focused. And so I think it just burnt me out. I was on high charge burnout at that moment. And I was going to say,
because I know you've had a lot of different roles in terms of VP of sales, direct, indirect, and then VP of research. So how does that transition go from being a high level salesperson to then doing a research and analysis based role?
So I call myself a recovering seller. I am a classic seller. I bleed sales blood. I love to sell. I love the hunt. I love the challenge. I love the competition. I love the wins. I love the commission check. I love everything about it. And then I learned to love marketing, which was very different. And then I have a deep now appreciation for customer service. So when I got to manage all three of those, it gave me this super unique perspective. But I was grinding to a point where I was working, 14-hour days, 6-7 days a week. I hadn't slept in my own bed for 7 straight nights in almost 3.5 years. I'd completely disconnected from my life. I was heads down in my career, and I literally hit a wall. I was at a burnout, and I realized that I was giving far more than I was getting back. And so part of the reason for me to completely change what I was doing was I knew I had to remove myself from that environment that I thrived in, but I, kind of over pivoted in, if you will, right? There was no balance in my life whatsoever. The first couple of years being an analyst, I kind of played one at work. I didn't know what that meant, but I'll tell you a story of the first day. So it was it was the annual kickoff of everybody from Gartner from a research perspective and a sales perspective. And at the time, 2006, it was about an $800 or $900 million business. There was maybe 900 analysts and 3,000 or so salespeople. And so we were all together in Florida, where we have our big symposium event, and it was our offsite. So now I'm in the room with all the analysts, and like 2 rooms down is all the salespeople. So this is my first endeavor of not being a salesperson anymore. And trust me when I tell you, like, I've been a salesperson my whole career, like my whole life. Like I was born to sell in that way. And so the leader of our SVP of research is on stage talking to all the analysts and tells a joke. And it's a joke about this philosopher. First of all, I didn't know who the philosopher was. Second, I didn't get the joke. And everyone was laughing. And I was in the back row and I go, oh my God, such a mistake. I made such a mistake, right? And then 2 rooms down, the sales team is like screaming and yelling to the theme of Rocky. And in my head, I'm like, I've made such a mistake. Like I'm supposed to be over there with those people because these people, I don't understand them at all, right? So it took me a good 2 years to sort of find my way. And then it was kind of 4 years before I started to learn how to have an opinion and use an opinion in a very advisory way. By the time I'd hit sort of year 5 and 6, and people are going like, wow, like, what'd you do the first 5 years? I was producing stuff, but I was producing stuff that felt very comfortable to me. It's when I started to stretch out of my comfort zone that I really kicked up my learning. And then I kind of found my way. So 5, 6, 7, 8, those years were deep, putting out thought leadership that shaped really go-to-market models for some of the biggest, well, the top 5 tech brands in the world. I helped with the go-to-market model. I helped stand up the AWS entire go-to-market and sales model when it was nothing. And now look at AWS, Microsoft, SAP, Cisco, HP, EMC, Dell, IBM, a little bit of Salesforce, Oracle, and Box, Dropbox, Workday, all the ones that were starting, Aperio, Twilio. Like it was just what an amazing front row seat to all that. And so I became this sponge and aggregator of all this information. And I learned I learned a new superpower besides selling, which was sort of translating and putting and finding patterns together and telling those stories in a way that was meaningful to the clients, and then changed action in what they were doing. So it was not an easy transition, but when it was time for me to no longer be an analyst and I was trying to figure out what to do, I could have gone back and been a sales executive or a marketing executive, a customer service executive.
Sure.
And I didn't want to do it again. I felt like I'd kind of found my way, and all of it led me to what I'm doing here today, being kind of an evangelist for all these topics.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, really. Has that helped in terms of, because you've got the sales experience, you've got the research and analytics experience, so you've got the full overview. So has that helped you in your role now at Salesforce as a global growth evangelist? So you've got all these different perspectives.
I would say absolutely. And I will tell you that I think, well, what I was told while I was an analyst, that the reason clients really appreciated my counsel and my advice and my thinking was I was an analyst who had actually done the job. So I'd been a sales leader. So when I was talking to a sales leader, like even though my sales numbers, like 300 million obviously is a big number, but people sitting on the other side of the table for me, like, one of my clients at a very large software company, I think it's the largest software company now in the world, her quota was 22 billion. Like, okay. Insane. It's like a small country. Anyway, so although I didn't have a $22 billion quota, I had been a sales leader. And then, I had run indirect channel programs and set them up as a channel chief. And so talking to somebody who ran channels that had 600,000 partners or 40,000 partners, I had an understanding. Or marketing, what it actually meant to do search engine optimization. Remember, I was really early, right? Or using chat or social. I was Constant Contact's beta client. When I started doing, internet digital marketing, there was a half a dozen or a dozen MarTech products. There are 8,500 MarTech products today. In 20 years, we've gone from a dozen to 8,500. So I had seen so much of it from a marketing perspective. And then customer service, I'd actually run a call center. Once again, not for millions of calls a day, but the understanding was there. And so I spoke the language, I understood the pains, And it really gave me a leg up because most analysts in the sort of tech world anyway, they study it, they've never done it. And so it gave me this unique perspective. And so I think accidentally being an analyst was where I needed to be, and it used all those experiences and job changes I had. I kind of had no plan, and then when I look back, I go, oh, it was totally the plan, that I would find my way. And so now it's very similar. I get a chance to have conversations now outside of tech, where I've been learning in healthcare and manufacturing and automotive and hospitality and retail. I'm just out of the tech world has allowed me to learn again for the last 4 years. So I feel super blessed.
Got it. Okay. Perhaps you could guide us through some of the digital marketing strategies or even offline strategies that have helped you have success in the more recent roles, let's say, that you've had, Tiffani, and some of the plans that you put into place to hit these massive quotas of 300 million. So what was going on behind the scenes to help fuel the sales team with the leads that they needed to close this kind of business?
Yeah, this is a great question because, so in full transparency, right? I say I bleed sales blood, like I'm a salesperson. So I'm joking what I'm about to say, but it's sort of like the salesperson will say, what do marketers do anyway? They add no value, right? Marketers say, what do salespeople do anyway? They add no value.
The
so
age-old
that little
classic.
sort of, kerfluffle, in order for me to have true respect for how I could help improve the relationship between marketing and sales, I had to understand what it meant to sort of be a marketer. And so I'd say that the things we thought we needed to do back in the early 2000s, even into the late 2000s, around using CRM or personalization or real-time communication or using tools to communicate at scale in multiple channels. That omni-channel strategy it's not what it was called, but it was like, look, it's a little bit of offline, and it might be, at that time it was, Blackberries and kind of cell phones. We were just sort of getting into all of those additional technologies. But I'd say from a marketer perspective, I've also watched it change from what KPIs they're tracking, being much more empathetic marketers, like really trying to connect on a human level of what your product can do and the service can do and how it can benefit those.
Okay.
Really trying to push innovation as a marketer. Like, we have all this technology at our disposal, but how does it help us have better conversations and engagement with our customers? And how do we empower our employees to serve our customers better? But also marketers are sort of bubbled up to say, look, we want a more strategic role and sitting at the executive table on things like owning customer experience. So I've really watched marketers go through this renaissance of how do we digitize the things we've always done, but how do we remain relevant? And I think this is where that rub happens of they tend to lean on KPIs and metrics that they've always used. How many leads, good or bad, doesn't matter. Like, where it is in the funnel, good or bad, doesn't matter. And that's where I think we've got a ton of opportunity that I'm really excited about is this thinking about these more engaged and data aware marketers versus just kind of doing everything they've always done.
Got it. Okay. And would you say that now you're the Global Growth Evangelist at Salesforce, would you say that there's a particular marketing channel that you've got that's your favorite to drive new business? Or is there a number of channels that you think are kind of giving you the best growth right now?
I'm excited about the technology that we're starting to see used during this pandemic that maybe were under leveraged before. And so,
okay.
As call volumes spike in call centers, using bots, using AI, using machine learning, using automation and prediction in order to serve customers in anticipating what they might need, because doing it from a pure human perspective during a time like this at scale is really difficult. So watching companies stand up customer service from, using bots to answer calls very quickly, or knowledge bases or chat to make sure that we try to push service out to not just be email or just be phone calls, because we know that the waiting time on phone calls has gotten larger. So if you can just chat really quickly and have an AI bot communicate with you at the basic level to get enough of the answers done, and then if in fact you need a human, then there's a path to do that. But if you could satisfy a good portion of them using the technology. So I'm excited about the things not used. That's one. Another is the usage of video.
Sure.
Using video as a way to communicate, and not just, having a Zoom call, right? Because I think there's also a level of fatigue happening right now with so much on video.
Definitely agree. Yeah.
It's like a day of meetings, face-to-face meetings from 8 to 5 all day. You feel like you were in meetings all day. It's like you feel that same way now, but it's stressful because you're at home and you have other responsibilities, depending where you are in the world, right? Of teaching your kids and taking care of your animals and grocery shopping and healthcare and everything everything you have to do. So I think that video is one that has been underleveraged. And then the third thing I'd say is that actually using CRM and customer relationship management and everything that surrounds that, actually using it during this time in an effective way means you would have had to do all the work ahead of time, right? Who are your customers? Is your data clean? Do you have all their contact information? Are you able to communicate even with your employees that are now all working from home? Like, if you've never had to communicate with all your employees remotely, how do you do it now if everyone's working from home, right? And so I think marketers have a huge role to play in coordinating the communication internally and externally, but you have to do it with technology.
Love that. And that's a great point about the AI side of things. It's not something we've spoken about much, but it's really rings true now, especially as during the pandemic, it's harder to get through to larger scale companies. So having things like AI bots or live chat on your website and things like that could be really useful tools. So that's a great point. Awesome. So for anyone that's tuning in, perhaps aspiring sales professionals or marketing professionals, as you've worked at very senior levels at some massive corporate companies, Tiffani, are there any tips or pieces of advice that you could perhaps share with them for someone looking to work their way up to that kind of level and how they can do that?
Yeah, well, selfishly, I'll answer that a couple ways. The first thing I'd say is that I wrote a book about 18 months ago called Growth IQ. And so it's published in the US, depending on where you're listening, but it's also published in the UK. So there's a European version as well. And so if you're so inclined to read it, let me tell you why I think it's valuable. I took sort of the 15 years of me doing the job, the 10 years of me advising about doing the job, and I looked for the patterns of what people have done to try to grow their business in a smart way. And I didn't reinvent the wheel. I wrote the book I would want to read, which it's 30 stories telling you the little pieces of advice that I wanted to share, but I did it through stories of brands from around the world. So whether it's Red Bull, whether it's Kone, whether it's Sephora, whether it's Starbucks, like I've got, in all kinds of industries. And that's the way that I wanted to tell the story. And so what I defined was that you need to understand the context of your market first before you make decisions on how to grow. But then I found 10 growth paths that you can choose from, things like customer experience, customer base penetration, optimizing sales, launching into new markets, accelerating products, diversifying. Like, it should not be a surprise to anybody. But what I found is that helping people focus on the basics and getting back to the things that really they need to think about was super helpful for us to describe and define how should you be thinking about growth going forward. Now, the opening of the book was all about 85 or 87% of businesses will hit a growth stall at some point in their history, meaning like 2 or 3 quarters of no growth to look to declining growth. And now we're in a global growth stall. So everybody, every industry, in every corner, has had some impact to their business based on what we're dealing with. So how you get yourself out of that growth stall and reopen, not just from an employee and a safety and a healthcare perspective, but I mean re-engaging with customers. Should you diversify? Should you shed certain businesses? Should you, optimize? Should you get back to basics? Should you simplify the business? Like, this is a time to take the opportunity to say, I don't know if we'll ever get this time again, and I hope we don't, but ultimately, can we be better for it when we come out the other side if we make these big investments and changes in people and process and technology today? And I would challenge to say that the answer is yes, if you're willing to do the hard work. And you may say, well, look, I've got no revenue. I'm on the brink of losing everything. How can you say make more investments? I'd say stop for a second, look into your customer base, How is it possible to re-engage them, sell during this time? Do you have an opportunity to keep them engaged with you and get you to where you need to go? Are you going to get back to the levels that you were previously? I hope you far exceed that, but I think it's going to be a long road. It's just, you don't give up on the customers you already have, and don't give up on the
and on that note, Tiffany, that's brought up a really good point. So for anyone that's tuning in, obviously we don't want to give away too many secrets from your book. We want to keep a bit of a cliffhanger there, so people are tempted to go and make the purchase. But for anyone that, like you've just said, that has is struggling a little bit right now in business, be it a sales professional, marketing professional, business owner, and they are thinking, look, how can I leverage ways to utilize my existing customers, so people that already know, like, and trust me? Have you got any tips on that side of things, on how we can kind of do a little better with our current client base?
Yeah, and I personally, I think that's the unmined gold.
Okay.
I think many marketers get very excited and fascinated and distracted by the shiny new object of, let me go get a new brand and a new customer, as do salespeople.
Sure.
And so, you have to make sure that you shift the metric if you're an executive to say, hold on, do we want to go after net new customers right now, or should we be taking care of the base, right? And so the challenge with taking care of the base is you have to know who they are. And that goes back to, if you didn't have it ahead of time, I said it a few minutes ago, this pandemic has, cracked open the underbelly of the fact that much investment had not been made around knowing who your customers are, capturing them into a CRM, et cetera. So selling into the base requires that you know who they are. That's the first thing. If you don't know who they are, then you're even in a more disadvantage. And if you sell through third-party channels, and that's why you don't know who they are, then it's working with those channel partners more closely, so that you can potentially do campaigns to those clients that you don't have that direct relationship with. So there's always a way to do it. But I would say my piece of advice here is, don't be tone deaf to the situation. You have to make sure that you're very aware that the communication right now cannot be all about, I'm trying to sell something. I realize that this is, in many situations, it's, I'm going to keep my doors open, or I'm not going to keep my doors open, and I need to sell stuff. That urgency should be there, but it should be there with an empathetic tone, and making sure that you are letting the customer set the pace on the type and frequency and recency of communication you have with them. Then you'll be in a much better position.
Got it. And is there any tangible ways we can do that with our customers? So it's always a tricky one, I find, when people say be empathetic with your existing customers. So is it a case of, let's say I've got an existing client base, and I want to touch base with them all. So I schedule a call perhaps for next week. I just say, look, I want to see how things are going. I want to see how you're getting on with our current product. I want to see how things are with you and your organization, and just kind of understand how business is for you, how cash flow is, how sales are going, how your staff morale is going, and all these kind of things. Is that the kind of conversation that you mean, or is it something completely different?
So that's part of it. I mean, I think asking how you are with no agenda behind it is important. But if you're using I just want to come by and see how you're doing as a door opener, and then you show up and you spend 1 minute on how are you doing, and another 59 minutes on trying to sell something, then you've blown the concept of being empathetic, right?
Sure.
And so I would say that, you want to lead with that. Look, we care about you, you're a customer. But also, you can't just go in and go, we're here to help you. Give some examples, like, here are other companies we're working with, and this is what they've been doing to get themselves back to work. Because right now, it's how everyone's trying to figure out, how do we get back to work? And that may mean working from home, it may be in a hybrid, it may be. So if you've got something that can help them get back to work, or you've got the ability to share with them stories of what others are doing, or how people are using your products and services today, sharing customer examples is a way to remove you from the equation and say, I do really care about, what your business is doing. And I want to share some value and insights with you on what others are doing that kind of look like you, or are in a similar situation, and how can you learn from them? And so it may be doing, a Zoom meeting with 5 or 6 customers, and you get them together, and it's just, hey, how are you? I wanted to get people together of like minds. Like, how are you guys getting back to work? And so it may be things way out of your comfort zone from a selling perspective, but how you behave right now, the things and the value that you add, the insights you provide, your clients will remember that long after this is gone. Like, were you there for them? Did you care about their well-being and their employees and their family? Did you add value when you reached out to them? Or was it all about you? Were you just trying to sell and you had sort of no interest in what was going on with them? And those two things are in stark contrast and will stand out when things start to get a little bit back to some kind of normalcy, and things stabilize. Sure. But I don't think things will ever go back to the way they were. I think it's going to be sort of this new future that we're going to enter. But I'd say that you're correct. There is a fine line between being empathetic and having it come off being inauthentic. It has to be authentic. It has to be caring. It has to add value. It has to provide insights.
Got it. Awesome. So before we wrap things up, Tiffani, I know you've got a top 50 ranked podcast. So I'm sure, I know for one myself, and I'm sure people tuning in would be interested to know how you've grown that so well, because you've had some awesome guests, as we said at the start, Seth Godin, Arianna Huffington, a whole bunch of other well-known people. So how have you built that up? Tell us a bit more about that, why that started and how you've grown it.
Well, it was, I had been here at Salesforce for a little more than a year. And, last year in 2019, I flew 365,000 fly miles. And I was on 6 continents. I gave 100 keynotes somewhere in the world. And so for 14 years, I've been traveling like that and speaking like that and meeting all kinds of really amazing people. When I'm backstage, and I have these really great conversations with people who I know others would want to hear this conversation. So selfishly, I was like, hey, maybe I'll start a podcast so that I can have these conversations with people that I've come to know doing what I get to do every day. And so I said, well, let me see if anyone would even be interested. So I reached out to 10 people and everyone said yes. And I was like, okay, well, let's give it a shot, right? And so 2 years later and 70 so shows later, it's every 2 weeks. I've had on amazing guests and I will tell you this, I've learned a ton. I feel like I approach things differently. I have different vocabulary and there's different subtleties behind my opinions and what I think, and it's really broadened my horizons on different points of view. I've learned a lot. So for me, once again, selfishly, I've loved the conversations, but that's what it was. It was, how do I take these amazing conversations I'm having with people I'm meeting while speaking around the world and bring it to others to hear.
Awesome. And I certainly agree. I was much the same. I did it in a little bit of a selfish mindset, as in I wanted to learn from essentially people that knew different things to me and that were smarter than me. I'm not going to lie. I don't know everything. I'm a sales guy. So I'm learning from marketing leaders, sales leaders, business leaders, and at the same time, hopefully giving value to everyone that's tuning in. And are there any secrets that you could share in terms of how you were able to get some big names on there? Was that from contacts from your own companies, or was there specific ways that you outreach to these guys?
Yeah, it literally was, in the green room, right? Behind stage, I'm like, hey, we're both on stage. Like, I have this podcast. I'd love to have you on as a guest. I love what you said on stage. Sure, bye, because it's a face-to-face ask.
Got it.
They've met me, and I'm going to guess, right, at some point. And so the first probably 40 guests were that. Like, hey, it's Tiffani. Oh, hey, how are you? Come on my show, right? Kind of a thing. And I only had a couple of people who told me no, and sometimes it was just timing, like I'm working on a book, wait till my new book comes out, kind of a thing.
Sure.
And then now it's been a little bit different where people reach out and say, hey, I think that this person would be great for your show. And I reach out and it's a cold ask, like, I don't know who they are, we've never met. But then in a moment of time, right, it's like we're 1 degree or 2 degrees separation. We know someone or they know someone that's already been on the show and that kind of thing. So I'd say that it's been people that I've met along the way to sort of build up that base of guests that I had. And then it got to a point where people started to come to me and ask to be on the show.
Fantastic. Okay. All right, Tiffani. And is there any daily habits that you've got or any habits that you recommend in order that have been quite crucial in your success and your growth over the years?
Yeah, I'd say this, that you have to become a student of your profession, whatever it is that you're doing, if you're listening to this, right? Whether you're a sales, marketing, customer service leader, an entrepreneur, startup business, you're an executive, like whatever your career, you need to be a student of it. And so when I was in the thick of it and I was running teams and executive, I always spent time. I used my airplane time actually to read. And so I would read, Harvard Business Review or Forbes or Fortune, or I'd read Strategy or I'd read Bloomberg. I would just consume content. Now it's podcasts. Now it might be I watch a TED Talk and reading books, whatever it might be. But I would consume, and I would consume on things that I maybe didn't understand. Not exclusively, because I'm not a fan of saying, look, I'm not really good at sort of the P&L side of the world, right? And I would always hire somebody who would be my financial right hand. And so we were sort of a team. But did I need to learn everything about the P&L? I chose not to. Now, some may say, oh, that's dangerous, but I was not a CEO at that point, right? So I'm running a small division. I've got somebody who is my sort of right hand in that. But I would say that, just being a student of the profession and always taking time and carving out time, half hour, an hour a day, is super important, because if you don't invest in yourself, how do you expect other people to invest in you? So I'd say that's my probably greatest personal growth hack, is to just spend the time listening, learning, having conversations with people, and really making sure that every day you go, I didn't know that. Or even if it's 10 minutes of reading an article, it's just like getting up, standing up and walking outside, right? And doing 10,000 steps a day. It's like, if you have to do 10,000 steps a day, listen to a podcast. So every day you're doing your steps, or you're walking your half mile, or you're getting out of the house, then you're listening to something so that you're stimulating that side of yourself as well.
No, I love that. And I think just to add to that, Tiffany, I think it's important that people not only consume content, but consume content in a way that works for them. So making sure that, just like you say, if you're going out to do exercise, going for a run, going for a walk, walking the dog, whatever you're doing, it might be that you want to listen to a podcast, or if you've got time in the morning, time in the evening, it might be you want to read a book, or it might be like me that you're really slow at reading, so you prefer to consume videos, consume podcasts. So yeah, find out the channel that works for you. That's some really sound advice like that. To wrap things up, Tiffany, is there one thing that businesses should be utilizing from digital marketing? So one channel that's going to help them grow from today that you could recommend?
So I would have answered this very differently before I wrote my book. I would say yes, and I would jump in to tell you the answer. Like, yes, I think it's this. And now I don't do that anymore. Now my safe response to this is, the one thing about growth is it's never one thing. So it isn't one channel, it isn't one customer, it isn't one employee, right? It's all those things combined. But if it's from a pure digital marketing perspective, my answer back would go towards what I said when I was talking about my book, is what's the context? Like, who are your customers? Where do they shop? How do they want to buy? How do you meet them there? So for me to say, oh, I think it's chat. Well, it might be, but your customers are not on chat. Or it might be video. Well, but your customers might. So for me to answer that, it would be a disservice. So my one piece of advice, no matter what role you're in, is the answer lies in your customers. So you have to find a way to determine how you found them, why they chose you, why they stay with you, what makes them buy, what do they like, what don't they like, all those things, because then you go, how do I get more that look like them from a customer perspective? So you might accidentally go, wow, we're really strong in these 3 verticals. I never knew that. Then market there, where those verticals are. Where do they read? What magazines, what podcasts, what websites do they go to, et cetera, et cetera. So I would do a disservice. The executive in me who thought that I knew all the answers would have been like, it's chat or it's video. The analyst in me goes, hold on a second. I can't answer that until I know more about what you're doing. So
it's a great response.
I would say, take an inventory, talk to your customers. They hold the and your employees. Between the two of them, they hold the answers.
No, I love that. I mean, we've had a lot of answers just up as LinkedIn. So I'm glad that you've said more, do the research, understand your ideal customer profile, speak to your ideal customers, and then get the answers from them. So I really like that. Excellent. So everyone, you've been tuning into Sam's Business Growth Show, where we sit down with business leaders, experts, and entrepreneurs from around the globe. We find out their story, how digital marketing's helped along the way, and exclusive tips and insights to help you skyrocket your business. Tiffani, if you could thank just one person, either dead or alive, having a positive influence on yourself and your career, who would that be and why?
Yeah, so I get a similar kind of question quite often. And, I would say that's such a hard thing to answer, because I feel like I have been blessed and surrounded and lifted up by so many that I feel like I stand on the shoulders of giants, like so many people that I admired spent time and advised me when I decided to write the book or do the podcast or start speaking or come to Salesforce, that it's so hard for me to name one outside of the collection of what I like to call my tribe. I thank my tribe. I thank everybody along the way who disagreed with me and gave me a different point of view, so I learned, or agreed with me and made me feel like, hey, I might be onto something, that, gave me the tough love when I needed it, and, helped motivate me when I needed it as well. So I'd say I collectively thank my tribe.
Tell us a bit more how people can connect with you. Tell us a bit more about the book, your podcast, and the best way people can get in touch.
So I'm very active on social. So I'd say, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm active there. I'm very active on Twitter. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. So it's at Tiffani_Bova on Twitter. It's at Tiffani Bova at Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. It's Tiffani with an I at the end. And my podcast is What's Next with Tiffani Bova. And the book is Growth IQ. So that's the book. And the British version, and here's the British version. So this
awesome.
This is the UK version, or the Commonwealth version. This is the US version. So either one, but outside of that, please reach out. I'd love to hear feedback, what resonated with you, what you agreed with, more importantly, what you didn't agree with, because that always helps me shape what I say.
Thanks very much, Tiffani. The show is sponsored by webchoiceuk.com, helping businesses skyrocket their leads, sales, and brand positioning via results-driven digital marketing, SEO, conversion-focused websites and mobile apps. That's webchoiceuk.com. Tiffani, really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Take care, everybody. Cheers.
Are you tired of constantly hunting for new customers? You could be missing out on regular inbound opportunities, all because your website isn't on the first page of Google. Perhaps you're already spending lots of money on advertising, but your website is failing to convert all of your hard-earned visitors into a consistent flow of new customers. If you'd like to learn more about our unusual approach that brings idle clients straight to you, connect with Sam Dunning on LinkedIn or book a free 20-minute consultation via webchoiceuk.com. That's webchoiceuk.com. Subscribe today for more digital marketing, sales, and business growth tips from the experts.